what they do. But we had a very public beef, back in the day. You should figure out a way to bury the hatchet and do something together. And then he responded, with "fuck you," and then that was it. And so,
what is going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Celtics Talk Weekly podcast. I am your host, Robbie Haytayan. Joined with me is my co-host, Justin Lowe. Guys, today we got a very special guest, Mahlon Williams, the CEO and founder of I Love Boston Sports. Thank you so much for joining us. How are we doing today?
Thank you for having me, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the invite.
We appreciate you coming on. Yes, I mean, if you're a Boston fan, you have seen this man's work. Justin, you got one on right now. You had to represent.
I have so many of these. I have so many of these.
Oh yeah.
So, to get kind of started, I have to ask my first question here. So you went to college in Norton, Mass, right? But you grew up in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So where does this love for Boston sports come in? Was it love at first, or how did you kind of get this? How did Boston kind of take over your career?
Sure. So when I was growing up in North Carolina, we didn't have any pro sports. And as you know, I'm from Chapel Hill, so basketball, college basketball is everything. Our football team when I was growing up wasn't great. It was one of those situations where, on I'm a Jordan guy. So first and foremost, so when Jordan went to the pros, I'm following Mike, I'm a Chicago fan. And so my uncle, who lived in Winston-Salem, is a huge Lakers fan. And so whenever the Lakers would play the Celtics, just to be the contrarian, I would root for the Celtics. And this is when Bird was playing. But I remember distinctly being over his house, over my grandmother's house, and watching the game when Jordan had 63 and he was cooking the Celtics. But the Celtics won. And I'm saying to myself, like, this dude can light him up for 63. And who are these guys that are handling him? And I just became a Larry Bird fan from watching, all those matchups in the 80s. And a lot of it started with just me rooting against my uncle, who was a few years older than me. And then I just became to appreciate what they stood for, and they were a hardworking team. And because I didn't really have a team in the pros per se, because we didn't really have a team in North Carolina, we didn't have a football team, we didn't have a baseball or hockey team or anything like that. I just kind of attached myself to different squads and different players that had gone through UNC. But something about the Celtics kind of reminded me a lot of the way a lot of the Dean Smith teams played. Teamwork was paramount. Seeing your teammates succeed, and just the love of the game. So I began to appreciate them, and that's where it came from. And then when I went to prep school after high school. I went up to prep school because my intent was to go back and play football at UNC. And so I came up to prep school for a year, and then I just got completely just a deluge of Boston sports. That's when I started watching hockey for the very first time, and when I picked up I was one of the only kids at my school, at prep school and also in college, that had a Sega Genesis. They had a video game system. And so I picked up NHL hockey, and God blessed me, and he touched my hands, and I became the man. And so that's how I learned hockey. I learned hockey and all the people from playing NHL on the Sega Genesis. But I was a diehard basketball fan, but just being in the Boston area and you're seeing how passionate the fans are, it reminded me a lot of the way that the UNC fan base is, especially when it comes to playing conference teams and Duke, of course. If you think it's crazy, here's what it is. When UNC is playing a top team in the ACC, and the ACC was very different when I was growing up. 80s ACC basketball, there's nothing like it, and it's a lot like the way people feel when the Boston teams are in the playoffs, but you get that the whole season. So it reminded me a lot of where I'm from, and so I just became attached to it.
Where did your first design? What was your first design in your company? Where did it come from? Where was it inspired? Do you remember kind of your first project and where
Oh
you
yeah,
are now. What was your
absolutely.
first project, and
So
where was the inspo from?
So the Red Sox and so we started our company right around the time that actually we started our company officially when the Patriots in 2007, when the Patriots were going through their undefeated season, and our first design was I leveraged the comic book artist that I knew, and we had a design. We never printed it because they ended up losing the game, and so and in retrospect, it was probably the best thing to happen because it forced us to have to shift and be nimble. But the first design we actually committed to a T-shirt. Um, it was pretty bad and pretty offensive. It was like the "I love New York," but it was a middle finger. I middle finger in New York, and it had
All right,
pinstripe.
here
And
it is.
it was great. It was a great, you know, outside of the stadium type of shirt because Yankee Suck was really big back then. But here's a funny story: is that so when I first got created it, and everybody thinks that their designs are great. Oh my God, this is amazing! It's a great idea. In retrospect, what really wasn't. It was an idea, but you need the bad ideas to get to the good ideas.
Right.
I'm on spring break. I'm about to go to spring break. Take my kids to. We had a house in Florida in West Palm Beach, and I'm on the plane, and I'm excited. I always want to see what people think about designs, and I'm leaving Boston, so these are Boston fans. So I'm showing these people that are sitting next to me on the plane. Hey, what do you think about this design? And I'm showing it's the I middle finger New York, and they chuckle and whatnot. And I thought it was all fun and games until I'm flying back and I get pulled over by the TSA people, and they're asking me all these questions. And I think they legitimately thought I was a threat because then they started interviewing my kids, and they're like, "This guy hates New York, so we got to check him out and make sure that he's not up to something." And so then I realized after being out in the street and realized that really that's not my cup of tea, and I'm certainly better than that. So I started to exercise some of the other ideas that I had, and my aha moment was a shirt was an idea of the Boston Tea Party, and we had and that was a classic design that we did, and I'm talking about the first version of it. That's actually what spawned everything. I had the idea in my kitchen, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I told my wife, I was like, "Listen, this is a great idea. It's the Boston Tea Party, blah blah blah. They're throwing the rivals into the water," and I had an idea of how I wanted it to look. And so I just literally closed my eyes and sketched it on a napkin, and it was the worst design. Oh my God, it was awful. But the architecture of what I was trying to accomplish, I then showed it to my comic book artist, and I was like, "Hey, this is what I want to do," and then we put it together. And at that point, I spent more money on a design, on one single design, than I had ever, to that point. And in retrospect, it wasn't even that much. It was probably, I think, between the two artists that worked on it, it was probably about $600 or $700. And but when you don't really know what direction you're going in, that's a lot, And I hadn't even put it on a T-shirt at that point. And so we were selling posters, and then we had one of our accounts that we were selling stuff to was like, you should really put this on a T-shirt, and we did so. And then next thing you know, it was like the biggest thing in New England for a long time.
Right. Do you have a favorite? Is that your favorite, or do you have a different one?
Well, I'm gonna say it's my favorite. It holds a special place because it was the first time you take something from idea to execution, and that's a scary process. But when you do it and you do it right, and it's successful, now you've got the template. You're not scared to do anything, at that point. And it's the crazy thing about it is that, as much as I was lamenting over how much I spent, that's like a drop in the bucket. I'd kill to spend $700. Now I've spent, $7 grand on a piece of art. And, so right now it's just one of those things where it led to a lot of other great things. So I'm happy.
You just kind of, just mentioned on something that kind of, touched home for you. Something that touched home for me is the shirt that I'm wearing, and you have multiple varieties of this shirt of different Boston sports teams. But I was telling Rob yesterday when he was telling me that we had you as a guest and how cool it was, because I wanted to express to you, like, these shirts, not only are they cool, but they're like, they touch home, especially if you're a Boston sports fan. They touch close. And for me, I'm the biggest Beatles fan. Like, I'm the biggest Beatles fan you'll ever meet. I'm also one of the biggest Celtics fans you'll ever meet. And I tell people all the time I'm wearing this shirt, and they're saying that's the coolest shirt. And I'm like, For me, it is for sure because I love the Beatles. I love the Celtics. You can put the Beatles and the Celtics on one shirt. You see it. You see it here. You see it on my chest, and absolutely, I love the work. And there's so many different varieties as well of the different teams and of that we've had throughout the years. Yep. And I just I wanted to just tell you how much I appreciate specifically all your shirts, but specifically these shirts that I wear on an almost everyday basis. I have so many different varieties of this shirt.
Okay,
it's like the coolest thing, and I'm like the biggest Beatles guy. So when you
that's awesome. Beatles, you're a little young to be a big Beatles fan, but you know what, man? It's we do there's a balance that's required when you're trying to merge two different concepts that don't really naturally go together. And so, there was a learning curve when I first started because sometimes you could put a little bit too much toward one side versus the other. And it's not relatable to a sports fan because it's too much music, too music focused. But once you get it right and you get the mixture and the formula correct, it really does strike a nerve with people. And I'm glad you enjoy what we do. Hopefully we can keep doing it.
It's like the details as well, because you get the Abbey Road and you look at, I don't know if people are familiar with the Abbey Road cover, but Paul McCartney, happy birthday to him today, by the way, he's barefoot in the album cover. And to the detail, you get a barefoot character in each shirt. So I think even just the details on it are especially amazing. And I do want to bring up another design of yours that you had mentioned in a previous interview years back, the Darth Vader. You were on the sidewalk one day and you saw the Darth Vader, the Star Wars. You turned it into a Bill Belichick, where it's funny because you look at Darth Vader, he's wearing a mask, his emotions don't change. The big meme, the running meme here in New England is good or bad, his emotions don't change, Bill Belichick. And you put that onto a shirt, and I mean, you see it everywhere.
And it's the craziest thing too, because you could spend all day, and I do this a lot. You're trying to come up with like the perfect idea, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere. And at that point, I was in Rosendale. I was at Sophia's Grotto. We were sitting out on the patio with my kids, and because that's their favorite place to eat. And this kid walks by with a Darth Vader shirt, and it was like that, just like that. And the crazy part about it is that once we did that design, I was like, I don't know if people we had just released a whole bunch of new stuff. And I wasn't really sure that people were really going to gravitate toward it. So I was like, you know what? Let me just, we'll sit on it for a while. So we sat on that design for a long time. And then I said, you know what? Let's print a couple of banners, because we can get banners made. We made like 3 or 4 of them. And we took them out to the Patriot game. And this woman who had been buying stuff from us for a number of years, she came by our spot. We had a spot right outside where Rodman Ford was. She came by, and so she was like, listen, I got great seats. She was like, can you still hear me? Yeah. She was like, I got great seats. I'm right in the front row, right at the 20, and so we gave her one. And then she hung it over the balcony. And then it got on TV. And it became a big thing on social media. And then Barstool tweeted it out. And then they screenshotted it and bootlegged a T-shirt, and I was like, Jesus. So I was like, guys, we got to do it now, because then we were going to do it anyway. But if these guys are going to sell a bootleg version of our shirt, we got to put the original on. It's going to be a better quality version. So we did it, and it was like it struck a chord with every single 55 to 75-year-old person in New England. It's funny because you'd hear the same comments. A woman would come in and be like, "Oh my God, that's Bob right there. That's Gary. Let's get it for him."
That's incredible.
It's
That's too good.
So, it was by far the biggest selling shirt right out the gate that we've ever had. I mean, I think we debuted it. It was the Aaron Rodgers game. We went because we had tickets to that game. We had like 11 tickets to that game. I took our whole team, and I think there was October. I think there was like either right before Halloween or whatnot. But November 1st, we had them 2 days later. The shirts 2 days later. And between that and the end of the year, we sold, I think it was like 35,000 of these shirts. It was insane. Right. It was genuinely crazy. And we've had a lot of successes over the years, but that one in particular was great. Free Brady.
I gotta ask about the events you guys been hosting at the store, because it's got to be pretty cool to get guys like Kristaps, like Pritchard, like athletes into your store. And what's it like working with them? Because you see them on the court, right? You see the personality, but to you, what's that been like, that side of the business where now you're working with the athletes right now? It's they're front and center with you.
Well, I think the hardest part for us is, at least for me, is we do so many of these events, and at this point, we're certainly not caught up in the hype. We try to afford ourselves a few minutes to be able to get to know these guys. But as you start having guys there more and more, you start to pay attention to how they interact with the fans, because that's really why we do it. A quick story about me is that, I grew up in North Carolina, and I remember I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and I was a big Batman fan. Spider-Man was my guy, but I was a big Batman from the TV show. And there was a car dealership, and Burt Ward was there signing. He's the Robin on the Batman, and I don't even know if it was a real him, because we were my mom took us to go see, Batman and Robin on ice like a couple days later. So it might have been whoever the ice skater, probably a flamboyant ice skater who was pretending like he was Robin. But anyway, so we stood outside this car dealership in this long ass line, and I got all the way up there, and I was all nervous because I was so, I watched all the episodes on TV, and he signed a Frisbee for me. He signed a Frisbee with the dealership. It was worth $0 because it had the car dealership's, logo on it. And he signed it, and I thought it was like the best thing in the world. And, so the way that I felt in that moment is what I try to help recreate for other kids that, with the business of memorabilia and these paid appearances, these kids don't really get an opportunity, and the kids that can afford it can, but then there's also kids that, I live in West Roxbury, and, every one of my neighbors has about 1 million kids, and it's all Irish, that's just the way it is. And so when we started doing these, the first one we did was, we did Brad Marchand. He wasn't the first, but he was the first one that when we said, let's get serious about doing these on a consistent basis. And we did it at a little pizza shop around the corner, and the line was around the block, and that same feeling that I had, it was great to be able to see these guys do it. And I think the players themselves appreciate it, because now they're not, in a very sterile environment where they're just, they're seeing people, pay to get their jerseys, and it's really impersonal. Right. But when you see a mom with 3 kids and they all got a Marchand jersey, and and it's just much more intimate. So that's why we do it. But the other part about it is that we are in a position where now we, can have business opportunities, because these guys come into our store and they see what we're about, and they're like, okay, there's something different about these guys. And it's hard not to be impressed with the artwork, once you come in and you see kind of the stuff that we do. And the hard part right now is going to be trying to differentiate ourselves in the age of AI, when people are just pushing a button and getting some instant art. We've been doing it for God knows how long, actual artwork. And so when people say, oh my God, that's just AI or that's Photoshop, I'm like, listen, that's why I keep actual sketches, and I let people see how the sausage is made sometimes, because it looks so polished that they don't believe that it's actually, artwork. So
I was gonna ask you, how do you differentiate that? Because I mean, it's advanced as anything, AI and how everything's kind of going about, and you just never know what's real anymore, and what's actually pen to paper and all that. So you keep sketches around, and you kind of distribute them and make sure people kind of see, like, no, that we genuinely work hard at this. This isn't something that we type into a computer and it makes it for us.
Well, that's the other thing too, is that, so, Wayne Gretzky said, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck is going. And so I spent a lot of time looking into, different ways that people are doing different things, looking into AI. I need to be proficient with what people are doing and what people are using, so I can know how to position ourselves against that. And one of the things that I will say is that, there's a place for some of the stuff that's being generated, but there needs to continue to be an appreciation for people who are able to do actual art. And I think that it's one of those scenarios where if you just look at some of the advances recently with AI and movie making and text to video, there's going to be a whole new process of movie creation. And you're going to start removing some people from the equation, but the people who are the true creators or the directors are now able to still do some things, and you'll see a whole new reinterpretation of people's creative vision. But I gotta stay. It's hard. I gotta stay on top of it. Our biggest issue right now is that people bootleg the shit out of our stuff. I mean, we get bootlegged like a lot, and it started with our fight with Barstool years ago, and while I'm certainly not a fan of Dave Portnoy. I can respect what he's put together, and I respect his hustle because he started in the street, and when you're out there fighting it out and in the street, and you're actually you're putting in some work, you can do nothing but respect that. And so he's got a few more commas than we do, for sure.
Right.
But so. Anyway.
What's that like though? You got a rival competitor like Barstool, right? Is that something you guys monitor them? Is that real in the industry? You know what I'm saying? Or is it like they do their thing, we do our thing?
It's like, listen, here's the thing. I don't really pay attention to what those guys do. I do know that they're a popular site, and I know that we're the anti-Barstool. There was back in their early days. When guys are, looking at chicks on their computer, on their site and whatnot, we appeal to the moms, the aunts, and, the ladies that would smack the hell out of their husband if they caught them, on Barstool. But again, I'm not taking anything away from, from what they do. They've done,
you're doing your thing.
And I told our guys too, I said, listen, man, look at what they do. But we had a very public beef, back in the day. And I sent, listen, the crazy thing is that I'm watching the stuff that they're doing in terms of the stuff that they're putting out, because we never really would really see any Barstool stuff in the street. And I'm watching like the shirts that they put out, because what they're doing is they were biting a lot of the stuff that we were doing. And and so I'm like, listen, it got to the point where whenever we would put out a shirt, they were very brazen about it. We're going to take your shit and we're going to sell it, period. I think they even said that in the post or whatever. So I sent an email to Portnoy, and I was like, listen, and I I'm a big rap dude, and I got the crazy thing about me, which is kind of how I do what I do, is that I'm a very odd guy in the sense that I've got a near photographic memory, and I can't use it for anything else but this, and I got ADHD that's very, very bad. But at what I do, I think I'm the best. I'm the best at it, And so I reached out to him. I was like, listen, there's a lot of stuff that we can do that we just choose not to, because you guys do that stuff and that's your lane. But I can help you with that. There's a lot of stuff that ends up on our scrap heap that we would never do, but I know it would fly because that's their audience and that's that kind of humor. And so I prefaced the conversation with a rap lyric, from Mace. It was like, all this money that we can make, why y'all cats want to play a hate, And then I went to my spiel, and I was like, listen, man, this is what you should, we should figure out a way to bury the hatchet and do something together. And then he responded, with "fuck you." And then that was it. And so at the end of the day, I don't hate on. I mean, listen, I'm not a fan, but I am a fan of his hustle and what they were able to put together.
Right.
There's a certain amount of respect and all that, but I got to give it to you, the designs and the creativity and the consistency of it all as well. Is your mind just constantly, and I know you have a team, but is your mind just constantly in creative mode? I mean, you're sitting there in a restaurant, you're sitting there at a library, you're sitting there and you go 100%. Like, oh, that right there. 100%. Or if the Celtics sign a new player or the Patriots sign a new player, instantly, what can I do? What can I do with this?
So I will tell you this, and it's it wasn't the easiest thing to deal with, because I started this company when my daughter, I think, might have been 4 or 5 years old, and I just had a son.
Happy belated Father's Day.
Well, thank you very much. there is, and the only way you really understand this is if you talk to people that, like on my team, like I have a hard time setting boundaries. Like when I say I'm legitimately obsessed with what it is that I do, I am, and I'm. A lot of it is just the competitive nature in me. Is that if if I look over my shoulder and I see one of my competitors, that means I ain't moving fast enough. So I'm always worried about the next guy catching up to me or taking what it is that I have. So, I don't have an on and off switch. I literally spend 7 days doing what I do. I keep a notepad with me. I have my phone where I put down ideas, and I also have another internal document where I just rattle off. I do brain dumps of all these ideas, and then I'll circle back with them, and then I'll just try to refine them over time. And some of them are shit. Let's call it what it is. But I've said this before, is that you need bad ideas to get to the good ones. And when I first started doing this, I had a goal of doing 3 designs a week. And I didn't care if the designs were great, bad, or whatever. I just needed to get 3 ideas on paper a week. And so the idea is that it's just the consistency and the repetition, you're going to get better with what you do. And sometimes the ideas are better than the execution. And then sometimes, if you have good execution, you can take a design that's pretty simple and really jazz it up. I mean, there was really nothing to the Belichick shirt, in terms of the concept was better than the artwork. It was just basically a picture of Bill, but that shirt got bootlegged. Like it's put it like this: one of the people that bootlegged it, and I know exactly who they are. It was their biggest selling shirt like ever. And they were tied in with some stores and flea markets and places all over New England, and they bootlegged the shit out of it. They don't know that I know that they did it, but
right. This is the message. This is the message to them.
Yeah, listen, at some point, you'll
how often do you listen? How often do you, not necessarily criticism, but how often do you kind of, maybe pull in some ideas or some recommendations from fans and people on the outside? Do you ever kind of, are you out there ever, whether you see in comment sections or people come up to you or anything like that? Because I have a huge I'm willing to make a pitch right now to you.
All right, listen, I mean, I will tell you this, is that I did get pitched by a guy who came to my store and was like, what would be a great idea if you had Tom Brady and you had Bill Belichick in like a trophy room, and you had the heads of all the different animals for the team that they played. And I was like, wow, that's actually a really, really good idea. And we ended up making it into a shirt.
So you're the pro. Okay. I'd like to respect you as the pro, but I'm in my famous rap words, Luke Cornett. Huh?
Okay. All right.
Listen, that within itself is the idea. Luke Cornett, and we can spitball some things. I can, I'm not going to go into it right now with you because we're trying to keep the pod moving, but I just want to put it into your head. Luke Cornett. I'm a big Luke Cornett guy. I might be a bigger Luke Cornett guy than Luke Cornett himself. I just want to put that out there, man. And I know he might not come back in free agency, but
let me ask you this. I'm very reticent right now to take you guys down the rabbit hole. But if you would allow me, I will. So let me do this.
Oh, I could cry. Right
now. Can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
All right. So here's the deal. You know that we did the collaboration with Peyton Pritchard, right? And that went great. And that actually was, and this is
got a shirt.
So this is a crazy thing, is that Peyton wasn't even on our radar. His people reached out to us. He was asking for a trade, and it was a scenario where, we weren't really looking in his direction. But we had him come to the store. We were like, listen, all right, we'll bring him in. He came to the store. He saw what we were about, and the people gave him so much love. And it's a lot of kids that come to our events, families and whatnot. So he saw that it was a very personal experience. His agent was there to witness it firsthand. And they were like, this is the best experience we've ever had. Let's do it again. Da, 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 da. Now, before that, and my time this may be a little off because there's so many things that happen. But before we were even looking at doing anything with Peyton Pritchard, the guy that we wanted to do stuff with and we've been chasing him for 2 years, is Luke Cornett. And I knew right away that this dude was that. I was like, yo, because I called him Scal 2.0 because I was like, Scal was like the first athlete that we ever had success with. And he'll tell you, if you ever meet Scal, he'll tell you that we were a big part of helping his personal brand and helping him with the popularity when he carried it over into Chicago. And then they dubbed him the White Mamba out there. But it was what we did here in the street that really blew up his star power. And he was a great dude, and he was so perfect. He didn't take himself too seriously. And I was like, Luke Cornett is like 2.0 of Scal. I was like, this dude, that's the guy. But the other thing, too, is that I was like, he's not a scrub. I'm watching him play, and I'm very good at analyzing, the game, if I must say so myself. And I was like, this dude he's quick off his feet. He's got incredible timing around the rim, plays within himself. He doesn't try to do too much. He, as much as I love Rob Williams, I was like, this is the guy right here. He can do everything that Rob can do.
That, Rob? You're
hyping Justin up too much.
But listen, here's the thing: is that, and I'm saying to myself, I'm like, yo, we've been trying to get this guy for the longest time. We keep increasing our offer, and I don't know if you can see this, but I'm gonna just show you real quick. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. And this might take me a second to get it right. All right. So this is an email today because I had reached back out to his agent. Can you see this?
Shaking. You see?
Yeah, we're going to get it on the stage right there. There we go.
Yeah. And so this was them telling me for like the umpteenth time, no. Oh, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. But he wants to focus on all the whole time was he wants to really focus on what's happening on the court. He got close a couple times. And then and I was like, listen, let me reach out to him in the offseason. And then I got another email saying he really wants to focus on, his on the court stuff. And I'm like, it's the offseason. What do I mean? So to me, that tells me that he doesn't want to do it, or his agency doesn't want him to do it, or maybe I'm just talking to the wrong person because, he's worn some of our stuff. And, I bet you if you put me in front of him for 2 minutes, I guarantee you I can get him. But I've been a big fan of his for a long time. And I thought last year, not this past season, but when we won the championship, I told people going into it, I was like, the guy you need to watch out for in the playoffs is going to be Luke Cornett because people aren't going to think about him at all. And this dude's going to eat you up. And my buddy was who I played basketball with in college, who was a big New York guy. He's out of the New York area, and he was a hell of a player. And he thought I was crazy. And so for whatever reason, Luke didn't play much in the playoffs. So the beginning of the season, we went to the season opener and we went to a couple of preseason games, and then Luke is just killing them. And I was like, this dude, I was telling you the whole time and the whole season, and even when we started doing stuff with Pritchard, I was like, listen, this kid Pritchard he's legit. And he was like, no, DiVincenzo is way better. I'm like, I'm telling you, dude, listen, this dude is fearless. And so, so anyway, so Luke Cornett, I'm a big fan of. His people say that he doesn't want to do anything. And so, which is unfortunate because he was supposed to be the guy before Peyton's people reached out to us and was like, hey, let's do a t-shirt after the appearance that he did. And then, I had the idea of Pritch Please. And I was like, oh shit,
you had a lot of Luke, please. Luke, please.
Yeah, listen. So I did something during the playoffs. We just did a limited run. It was there's a formula to all of this stuff too, because you got to have something that's catchy. I think that the rap tie-in for me is huge. Like when we did when we had Brad Marchand, we released the Brutang Clan, and this is when. Because his nickname was Noseface Killer, so we released a whole mixtape on Wu-Tang beats, all about the Bruins. It was called a Brutang Clan. The artwork was off the chain, the t-shirts, crazy. So I texted Brad. I was like, "Listen, here's the deal. Everything's already laid out. Do not mention this, and do not wear that shirt until I give you the word, because I knew that if we put it out there, that Barstool was going to snatch it." So when we finally put it out there, and then Brad was doing a weekly show. On one of the radio stations, I'm sending in messages to the station. I'm like, yo, ask him about this, because Brad probably wouldn't have brought it up on his own. But it was huge. And so the Pritch Please, I was like, all right, listen, I got, we got the rap thing down with that. That was an easy correlation to make. And so with Luke, I was like, damn, what are we going to do with Luke? And then I was like, who let the dogs out? Because he was, he would do the whole dog thing. I was like, who let the dogs out? Luke, and so I'm a fan of his, man. I really, and I'm telling you, man, depending on what this team decides to do next year, but that's a guy you got to keep, because he's, no matter what team you put, listen, you can put him on a bad team and he's going to be a guy that's going to get you, he'll be, a 14-point guy, 14-8, but if he's on a good team, he'll get you a 14-8 on a great night, but he'll do all the little things that you need. So that's my dude right there.
Maybe besides the Beatles shirt, your attempt to get Luke Cornett, you've that my respect is just it was at the ceiling, but it went through the roof when I find out you're emailing Luke Cornett's team for the past few years. But I got some ideas. So if you ever,
listen, there's no monopoly on good ideas, man. Hit me with them. Bring it on.
And and I could, and if you ever need anybody with the Beatles Celtics department, I have a few ideas on that too. So we can keep it rolling, man. We can keep it rolling. But no, the work is incredible, and as I mentioned earlier in the podcast episode, specifically, this shirt and the varieties of shirt with the Patriots and stuff, it's also personal. It's one thing to be, oh, that's a cool shirt, but if you can connect to a shirt and you can, it's even more special. So these shirts, specifically, not only amazing work, but if it hits personally, then you're going to love it even more.
Well, I'll tell you this, the hard part is keeping shirts, in the rotation and in stock as you start to do more and more designs, and those designs are really, really hard to do and to put on a t-shirt, and I think we do a very good job of doing it, but it's cost prohibitive to print just a small amount. So usually when we print them, we print 1,000, couple thousand at a time. I had somebody email me yesterday. There was two designs. The one was the Beatles with the Bruins, the old school guys with Bobby Orr, and he was like, listen, I had this on a hoodie and it's all worn down. I want to get another one. Do you guys still sell it? And he referenced another design.
Yeah.
And so it's like one of those things where you're like, everything's personal, and I want to be able to have everything that we make in stock all the time, but it's just unfortunate you can't really do it because people do get an attachment to some of these designs, and they're like, this is, I had a lady, listen, this is crazy. I mean, some of the stuff that's happened is just wild. We did the shirt, Bill Belichick crossing the Charles, right?
Right, classic.
So, all right, and then we almost got sued by the people, the head of the Charles, because it was originally called Head of the Charles, and then the head of the Charles people didn't think it was funny, and they were threatening to take us to court. But anyway, we did that shirt. We had a follow-up shirt. It all had a Revolutionary War theme, and then we put out The Last Laugh, which was like kind of a Last Supper with the whole team, and it was a 28-3. And so I happened to be at our store. We were in Saugus at the time, and I happened to be in the store, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and the lady was like, trying to describe the shirts. Do you guys have this in stock? And it was a very hot shirt at that time. And so I'm telling her, yeah, we have it in stock. Just come down. And she's trying to describe to make sure I have the right one. And I'm like, lady, I'm the guy that made the shirt. Yes, I know exactly which one you're talking about. And this lady, I swear, and you think I'm lying, but I'm telling you the truth. This lady broke down and started crying on the phone. She was like, "Oh my God, I can't tell you." She was like, "The shirt, I got the one with the one with him in the boat and all the hidden stuff that's in the." And she was like, "It's my favorite shirt, and I wear it all the time." And and it was just, and I thought it was like, I was like, "There's something. She's unstable. There's no way that she has this kind of attachment to the shirt." And then, as you start, we do a lot of events all over New England, and sometimes it's me out there, and sometimes it's my team, or my team, and I might be hanging in the background or just kind of, they're schmoozing with people. I've had people come up to me and tell me about designs that I made and stuff that is buried in because we put a lot of Easter eggs in some of the artwork. And so this person's telling me, "Oh, did you know that there's like all kinds of hidden stuff in the painting? Really? You should really learn it. You'd probably sell more if you knew the guy who made all this stuff. He's a crazy guy and he's a genius and all this." And so I play into it. And, and I'm like, I'm like, "So really, what kind of stuff is in it?" And they're telling me all this stuff. And then when I tell them that I made it, I'm the guy. and they're like, they think I'm lying. They think I'm, bullshitting them,
Right.
and my wife, who's, she was in here just a second ago. She's like, we went to Starbucks. There was a shirt that we had it's called Monster Mash, and it's like all the Boston mascots as like horror movie characters. And it was so we're in Starbucks in where we live. We live in West Roxbury. The guy comes in right behind us. We're in line. He comes in wearing the shirt, and I'm like, "Oh man, that's a great shirt. That's pretty sick, And he's like, "Oh yeah, I love it. I just got it." He's showing it off, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the guy that made that." And he didn't know what I was, meant by that. And I was like, "No, I'm actually the guy that designed that shirt." He was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Oh my god." He was like, "Oh," he's like, "Dude, you're a genius." And I listen, and my wife goes right. She goes, like, cause she's like, "This is like crazy," But here's the thing: is that when I see people wearing the products that come from our company, it makes it very personal to me. I had to tone myself down a little bit because I used to get so excited when I see my shirts out in the wild. I'm dead serious. I mean, it was like a problem, and I didn't realize the optics of it from the outside. It took me a while to, so have you seen the shirt that's the circle Mikhail Parrish bird? Have you seen that one? So that's the biggest shirt we've ever sold. I mean, that's by far, hands down. We had a version of it for Red Sox. And taking my kids to Disney World down in Florida on one of our spring break trips, and this is early on, and I see a guy wearing it, and I can spot my stuff from like wherever, and I see this guy, and I run up to him. I'm like, yo, you got my shirt on, and I didn't realize that it sounds like I'm robbing you. If when you think about a big black dude running up on you, saying like, "Yo, man, run your pockets. You got my shirt on,"
Right.
And the guys are like, they're all freaked out. And then, but I would get so excited to see stuff out there. And then I realized, I was like, wait a minute, I got to just kind of, ease my way into the conversation. But anyway, so I love what I do. And I love the fact that players love it too. And that, we found an audience here. We're trying to, expand beyond just this market because so many people like the stuff that even if you're a New York fan or a Philly fan, you can appreciate, kind of what goes into it.
You can.
So we're trying to do that. Anyway, I'm sorry. I digress.
Hey, never apologize. Never apologize.
Yeah.
That's what you're here to do. We want you to talk. The more you talk, the better, the better our product is.
And I know you had some questions about this upcoming season. I'm just going to tell you right now that I was of the mindset that if you had to let Jaylen Brown go, then, trade him to Dallas because I know he's tight with Kyrie and get Cooper Flag. I was of that mind. I mean, you got to make the money work and you got to get some other stuff. But the guy that you really want, you want Cooper Flag. I get it. Everyone knows why. But you want Derek Lively. That's the dude you want.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you now. Before we end the show, actually, it's funny you say that. There are some Jaylen Brown rumors that sparked today with San Antonio. So when you look at a guy like Brown, is this a piece that, like, where are you at? Are you on board with keeping him? Are you on board with shopping him? Like, where are you at?
I gotta tell you this is that, listen, I'm a huge Brown guy. So since 2000, since the bubble, I was telling people, I was like, listen, he's better than Jason Tatum. And not because Jason Tatum has way more upside because, you can't teach height, to be 6'9" and as athletic as he is. But there was some holes in Tatum's game, and I didn't feel like he was tough enough. And the main issue with his game was his mid-range. He was either step back three or drive all the way to the cup. He couldn't really adjust if a player disrupted one of those two options. But he's worked really hard at it, and he made huge strides this year. But I was like, Jaylen Brown, at some point, he's going to get tired of being called a Scottie Pippen, and he's going to, he's going to want his own team to prove that he can do it. Now, I think because he was MVP last year, that probably took away a lot of the desire to carve out your own identity because you were able to do it with the team that drafted you, with Jason Tatum on the team. People could see and respect what you brought to the table. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's closer to a Kobe than Tatum is.
I think so.
100%. And the thing about it is because he plays off of 2 feet He's the same height, but he plays off of 2 feet. His 2 feet game, his footwork is very reminiscent of the same moves that if you look at old Jordan tapes, Jordan from the mid-90s, his back to the basket game. Look at Olajuwon. There's a commonality between some of the go-to moves that they all have. Kobe, and Jaylen Brown is phenomenal at that. The thing with Jaylen Brown that he needs to really work on is he's got to find a way to get others involved and take over a game when you need him to take over a game without feeling like he's got to take over a game. Because when he feels like he has to do it, he puts pressure on himself, I think, and he makes some decisions with the ball that aren't the best, and it shines a spotlight. But if you can be that guy and you can find a way to get the rest of the team involved, and that's what Tatum has done, over this past year. But I hope they don't break him up. But if they do break him up, you're gonna get a lot. You got to get a lot for him because that dude he's an animal. The dude is an animal, and he's got a grit and an edge that Tatum just doesn't have. Tatum can get it, but I think it's going to take somebody literally smacking the shit out of him. And no, I'm being serious and forcing him to be an asshole. Like Kobe was. You want to be like Kobe? I'm not saying you got to have a Colorado, but it wasn't until Kobe lost everything and felt like he had to be an asshole to everybody because everybody was clowning him. So if people are already clowning Jason Tatum is a hell of a talent, but it's going to take him to get pissed off to the point where, and he did this past year. I mean, he's talking shit, and I think that would help his game. To be honest with you, talk more trash because it's going to force you to have to back it up. And but I'd hate to see. Here's the thing. We know Porzingis. Everyone's talking about him going, and I hate to see him go because he's a great dude, man, and he loves kids and he loves Boston. It's just unfortunate that he had a really tough year this year.
Well, you also don't see guys like Kristaps Porzingis too often be so happy and comfortable where they're at in terms of you see some guys get drafted and they stay with their team long. Like, no, Kristaps Porzingis was brought in the middle of the offseason on a trade that, was kind of franchise altering. They getting rid of Marcus Smart, your heart and soul of the team for the last 10 years. Like, that's a big move. Maybe not skill wise for Marcus Smart, but in terms of the franchise, that's a big dish out. So, for Kristaps Porzingis to come in, and especially with how New York and Dallas ended for Kristaps, and he came in and instantly fell in love with Boston. Boston fell in love with him, and he's had fun and he's had a smile on his face every night. I mean, there's been post-game press conferences where he struggled, whether it was with his health or with his game or whatever, and he's still saying, "I'll get him tomorrow," and have a smile on his face. So,
listen, let me tell you
you
something.
don't see a guy like that.
This dude is, first of all, you can't, like I said, you can't teach height. So he's 7'3", 7'4".
Yeah.
So you might end up having to keep him, because people that you might want to trade him to, don't know what they're going to get. You may have to throw in something else to get people to take him in his contract. But I will say this, is that if you can find a way to keep him, and I've seen people talk about maybe moving Drew and bringing Marcus Smart back. I was a guy who was like, Marcus Smart needs to go. 2 years, for 2 years, when he was Defensive Player of the Year, I was like, you got to get rid of him because this dude is the rest of the team is not going to grow with him there. You got to get rid of him. He gambles too much. He puts everybody in a bad position. You got to let him go and let these other guys be who they're supposed to be. Now I'm okay with bringing him back because now you've got Brown and Tatum established in terms of their identity. I'm okay with bringing them back. Plus you got, Derek White in the backcourt. I think that would be a great move to bring Marcus Smart back. And then you're not in tank mode. You're not in tank mode, and now you can actually do something. I already said that I knew that they weren't going to win this year going into the season. There was too many parallels between the 87 Celtic team when Bill Walton started out the season hurt with his foot. I was like, Kristaps out. Everything's
even in 08, 09, the very next year after the Celtics won and Perk went down and Kevin Garnett eventually went down. I mean, you hate to blame things on injuries and make excuses, but there's also a difference between reality of things and making excuses. But the pair, you're 100% right with the parallel.
And because Al is going to continue to play, if you can find a way to renegotiate his contract and maybe extend him, but cut the dollar amount down some, like that's what's hurting you, because a guy like Al, you don't want to trade him at this point in his career. He will have his number retired. The city loves him. Any other franchise, maybe not, but because the Celtics will retire anybody's number, and he's a beloved player, but you got to, that's a big contract. So I think if you're going to find a way to get some guys to take a little less, and maybe Kristaps as well, because he already made his money. If you really want to stay here, let's see if we can't, you still got to move a piece, but maybe Drew's that guy you move, and JD Davison, kind of fills in that spot, and you have Marcus Smart, and with Pritchard, that you'd still be a contender. I'm going to go out on record and just say that I think that they're going to make it to the finals, the Eastern Conference Finals, at least this coming year. I don't know about the NBA Finals, but I think that they're going to make it. They're going to surprise some people, because they're going to think that because they don't have Tatum, they're not going to do it, and they really needed to get punched in the mouth. This team really needed to be tested. And,
reality check.
Yeah, but I think that they're tough. They got the ingredients. I'm optimistic.
Well, I like your optimism. I will say this on Porzingis: if I were to pick one of the three, Holiday, Hauser, and Porzingis, who everyone's kind of ruling out, Porzingis probably will be the guy staying. If they're, if the market's not really there.
I think Hauser's gone. He's gone. That's listen, here's the thing. I will tell you this. His agency was trying to get us to do an appearance, and they were, hey, we got, does he want to do anything, blah, blah, blah. So we were like, all right, we'll do him. We've had him before. We had 2 appearances with him before. Then they asked for the moon. They asked for this crazy, crazy amount. And I was like, nah, I'm out, And then they came back to the table. They were, well, it's let's talk. Well, let's figure out. And because they were as motivated as they were to try to make something happen, even after we were very clear that, like, yo, man, I'm walking away from this. So led me to believe that they knew that he was out of here, and they were trying to get some stuff booked, because they knew that, win or lose, that he's probably going to be moved. And Shireman is going to be that guy. Shireman's going. He's a year and a half away. He's a year and a half away from being what Sam Hauser was, and probably a little bit more, because he's got a bigger body and he's a little bit grittier than Sam.
Well, the thing with, and this isn't the bash Sam Hauser show at all, but it's also.
No. I love Sam.
Yeah, but and I'm about to mention, and I just mentioned, there's also a difference between reality. Reality is, like, look at a guy like Baylor Shireman last year, who got very little opportunities, but in those opportunities, look at his playmaking, look at his defense, look at his shooting. It's all consistent. It's all there. But I'm a little bit worried that with Sam Hauser, his money's going up, but his shooting's going down. And if he's not making 3, 4, 5 threes a game, is he playing the same defense as Shireman? Is he dishing out the same assists as Shireman? I don't know. I think I'm leaning towards Shireman.
Well, the thing about Shireman too that you got to realize is that the dude is a lefty, and let me tell you something. No, but listen. Here's the thing: is that, like, Boston has a hard time when New York had Julius Randle, and they had Jalen Brunson. They killed us this year, obviously, but we had a really difficult time guarding left-handed shooters, and Baylor, being a left-handed guy, creates a lot of problems for players, because the way that you're used to playing a guy just changes, and that extra space for a guy like him that you need to get a shot off is mirrored, and players don't know how to adjust to that well. And so it takes, so I think he's going to be a really good player. And, we're chasing him. He's the guy that we are. I don't want to say too much, but guys that we're chasing that.
Well, let me ask you this: in terms of the business side, do you have to separate yourself sometimes? Like, is it hard to separate yourself from, when you get those types of emails, separate yourself from, okay, this is also a business, and then the fan side of you, and the kind of oh my, like, this is amazing. Like, is it hard to separate yourself, or does it come to a point where it's like, okay, I got to draw the line here?
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, here's the thing: is that, well, first of all, it's not hard to separate, because at the end of the day, every dollar that these guys get paid comes out of my pocket. So I'm like, yo, man, You know, it used to be where I'm like, oh, well, you know, we're going to, you know, trying to acquiesce just to get a deal done. So you can say, hey, listen, we got this guy. But I'm like, nah, man, fuck that. You know, at the end of the day, it's like I got a price that I'm willing to pay. And, you know,
if you can't meet it,
if I will tell you, I tell my guys, like, look, I'm not paying more money without getting something else in return. So if you think that it's not fair and there's not a meeting of the minds, you know, then, you know, you just got to be comfortable with walking away. I will tell you this is that sometimes players that you were down with and you had good relationships with early on, you know, sometimes they don't see the value that you bring, you know, because their market value is going up. And I'm trying to tell guys that, listen, don't be so transactional. Sometimes you got to look past, you know, the money on the front end, and look at, you know, like, and I hate to keep going back to Peyton Pritchard, but you know, the beautiful part about that is that I know for a fact that we helped raise his star power. I mean, he was gonna be that guy no matter what. So I can't take credit for that. But I'm gonna tell you this is that, you know, we're like your Flavor Flav. Sometimes you don't want to have to go out and toot your own horn. You know, you just like, listen, these guys will tell you. You know, you don't know, you know. And so when you got we distributed. It had to be 40,000 posters, you know, free, giving them away at stadium, sending people to other cities and giving away posters, you know. And so when people see that, because everybody nowadays wants the algorithm and wants to let Facebook and, you know, and Instagram do all the work for you. But there's something to be said about getting out there the old fashioned way, hand to hand, and it makes it very personal. But we got some tricks up our sleeves this season, man. I know that this is a Celtics show, and so you don't really, some of the other teams don't really, you know, strike a chord with you guys. But and there's a couple Celtic players that I didn't really talk too much about, but it's unfortunate they've kind of been priced out of contention. But we're still going to take another shot at them. But and Derek White is one of them. I'll tell you that right off the bat.
That's a big one.
And I knew he was, you know, I didn't know he was going to be like he is now, but I was like, yo, this dude is. When we had Marcus Smart, I saw Derek White play with the, you know, the headband and the wild hair, and I'm like, yo, this dude is contesting every single shot. I'm like, yo, and I was already like, Marcus got to go. Like, this is the guy. He's gonna be the watch. And he was coming. He was like the seventh man at that point. But I'm glad to see that Derek is doing what he's doing. I'm flying out to go see his camp in a couple of weeks,
too busy drinking brews with our cousin from Boston. He's just too busy out there, man.
Let me tell you some bull. You want to hear some bullshit? I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna let you peek behind the curtain. So we had Derek in our store, you know, 2 years ago or whatever. He had a great time. I got to know his team real well. He hit the tip in shot. He started becoming a star, right? You know, and then we've been, you know, trying to get him back in the store for a while. We sponsor his camp. You know, we do the stuff for their pro shop. The Celtics don't give him anything. You know, he has a deal with Nike. They don't do anything for him. You know, but you know, we're the fat girl that you hang out with until all the students come back. You know, from school.
Damn.
So, I hate to say it. You know, but listen. Here's the thing. Is so you know, the thing that's interesting is that, you know, we start doing this stuff with Pritchard, and they start to see, you know, kind of what the value that we bring, and what we're all about. And then it becomes a situation where, you know, guys are a little bit more, you know, amenable to doing stuff that they probably, it doesn't necessarily become all about money and price. But Derek was a guy that we were supposed to do some stuff with. The plan was to have him come to the store with the championship ring and his gold medal. We had a custom piece of art that we were, and I'll send it to you. You can edit it and post or whatever. But and that was the plan. And then he became like the man. And so he wanted to do a t-shirt deal like Peyton. He was like, yo, man, his guys was like, yo, you know, Derek wants to do it. You know, he sees what's going on with Peyton, and he's like, yo, man, how can I get some of that? You know? Right. And so we put together this proposal, and then the agents got involved, which was unfortunate. And I'm convinced, you can tell, you know, sue me if I'm lying, but I'm convinced that they took that to Sam Adams and was like, yo, you know, you want to match this. And that's how they ended up doing the merch deal. So the 11th hour, after we put in months of work trying to get this thing through, you know, they did this the shirt deal. And we already had designs already done. I mean, it was like crazy because we have a whole whatever. Don't get me started. But
that shuts the door on that. It's like there's no way that could.
I don't know. I mean, I'm going out there to his camp. We're sponsoring this camp again this year.
Right.
We're the fat girl that that you're hanging out with in the summertime until school starts. So I'm gonna go out there and be like, listen, man, here's the deal. Look, we gotta shit to get off the pot. What are we doing here?
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, it's at some point, they say keep working until you can go into a room and never have to introduce yourself until people chase you down and stuff like that. And it's starting to happen because, we just got an email the other day from a high profile player in the Boston area. They want to do some stuff. And even the Celtic guys. So the Celtic guys, it went from being like, listen, you some guys selling shirts, down the street to now, like a lot of the guys that are, on the starting five are like, yo, hey, what's up? Can we get on this? So
right.
But anyway,
it's crazy how that works. Well,